Martian Manhunter debuted in Detective Comics issue 225 that was released in November of 1955, with the story titled The Strange Experiment of Dr. Erdell. In the story, Professor Mark Erdell utilizes his newly created transportational system as well as his newly invented robot brain to transport something from outer space back to Earth. Instead of like pieces of an asteroid or a bit of planet from Mars, he ends up abducting somebody that looks like a runner-up on RuPaul's Drag Race. The Martian introduces himself as John Jones, and after the two are acquainted, he then asks the professor if he can send him back home. Dr. Erdell then breaks the bad news to the Martian that his transportation device isn't calibrated to send something, it's only calibrated to retrieve it. So taking this time to recalibrate it and being able to send the Martian back to his home planet is going to take multiple years. John comes to the realization that he's going to be earthbound for quite some time, so he shapeshifts into the form that would be more suitable for human physiology. Upon seeing this, as well as just the shock of the moment, the doctor then has a heart attack and dies right there on the spot. With his only method of returning home now gone, John observes humanity, and he takes note that humanity has not experienced the great evolution, and as a result, humanity still has to deal with crime. As compared to Mars, they live in a utopic society devoid of any crime. From this point, John vows to be a superhero, fighting crime while biding his time. Bars. In sharp contrast, the Absolute Universe iteration of the character is not like this. Instead, it reimagines Martian Manhunter to be a complete departure from the previous iteration, but also remains true to the fascination that humanity has with beings that are not of this world. So today we're going to talk about Absolute Martian Manhunter by Deniz and Javier Rodriguez, as well as diving into our obsession with alien life. But first, a word from our sponsors. So then I said, Manhunter, I hardly know her. Oh, looks like we're a little bit early for the Patreon read. Hi everybody, my name's Kirby, and this is Marty, and much smaller Marty, and today we're going to be talking about our Patreon. Well, like, not our Patreon. They don't get paid. And they also don't pay taxes. And they really kind of just hang out in my head all the time. I should talk to a doctor about this. Anyways, before I do that, let's talk about all the ways that you can help support the channel and all of the things that would be really cool if you did. So first off, we have a Patreon. If you want to subscribe to the Patreon, you can do it for as low as $1 per month. You get access to these videos early, as well as behind the scenes information as I put it up in between videos. On top of that, we have the Comic Krackle merch shop, and newly announced, we have new designs on the Comic Krackle merch shop. So you can get something like this for the Mother Box News. But then on top of that, we have new designs such as the Comics Code Authority design. Editing Kirby, go ahead and put that in. And then on top of that, we have the topic of today's video, Absolute Martian Manhunter inspired designs over on the Comic Krackle merch shop. So that link's going to be right up here. And lastly, if you like this book and want to buy it for yourself, you can also help support the channel by going to this link or the link that's going to be down in the description for Third Eye Comics. Not only will you get the book for yourself, but on top of that, you'll support the channel. And lastly, you'll be supporting a comic shop and not Jeff Bezos. So it's kind of a win-win-win. Anyways, we're going to get back to the video. I'm going to go back to my conversation with the three of us, and I think we need to go to therapy. But anyways, back to the video. I'll see you later. So as I was saying, life on other planets has long held the imagination of humanity. The notion of life beyond Earth dates back to the 2nd century with Lucian of Samosata's True History. While Lucian wasn't drafting prose about little green men, the abstract concept of foreign entities from outer space stood the test of time in its relevance. A multitude of works would explore the ideas posited by Lucian, however, it wouldn't be expanded upon until Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. While scientists would use this as the catalyst to further examine human beings and life forms on Earth, Novelists would use this to envision stories of animalistic life forms beyond the stars. A consistent belief is that humans were special in their evolution as a result of Earth's atmosphere being conducive to foster a unique being. The specific set of circumstances allowing for human beings' evolution wasn't known to be replicatable in the known universe. The most notable of the works that came out of this era was H.G. Wells's The War of the Worlds in 1898. The novel depicts Martians to be invading Earth as a result of wanting to eliminate humanity. This would serve as a framework for the tropes of aliens being invasive and malevolent, but it would also give birth to the utilization of alien invasion stories as a reflection on the modern times and the political climate of the time. H.G. Wells inverted British society's relationship to imperialism, making the hunter the hunted. This would fundamentally alter humanity's relationships with aliens, as aliens would be the embodiment of social anxieties of the time. These themes would be elaborated upon by H.P. Lovecraft. His works would primarily include themes of fear of the unknown, cosmic insignificance, beings beyond human comprehension, and reality's decay. It should be noted that H.P. Lovecraft was not a good guy, and the vast majority of his stories were due to his bigoted nature. And he was considered bigoted by the early 1900s standards, so you know his vibes were I mean, honestly, just look at the guy. He looks like they took his picture in the middle of him trying to concoct a new slur that's the widest applicability. The work that's most commonly cited as the modern evolution of alien invasion stories would be Hector Germain Oesterheld's The Eternaut. The comic would be a narrative depiction of the invasion of Earth, and more specifically Buenos Aires, filled with allusions to the militaristic dictatorship that occupied Argentina in the 1950s. This, alongside the further depictions of aliens and defining their characteristics in early cinema as well as pulp magazines, would cement extraterrestrials in the cultural zeitgeist. And once it broke through this barrier, so too did social hysteria and conspiracy theories about aliens invading Earth and abductions that are being covered up by the government. Now, I know that that's a lot to take in, and you're kind of wondering whenever I'm going to start talking about Absolute Martian Manhunter. And don't worry, there is a reason for this preamble, and I'm going to get to it. But like any good video essayist, I need to tell you about the history around a topic before we can actually dive into it. In the modern day, narratives pertaining to alien life contains either subdued or explicit metaphors, providing as cultural critique of the time. Just to name a few, E.T. released in a time of American disillusionment in the government, with children being more empathetic to those looking for refuge, and the government quick to take up arms against the unknown. Ridley Scott's Alien, released during a time of rising tensions between the United States and Russia, making the xenomorphs into highly adaptable killing machines, reflecting the same dread brought on by the Cold War's mutually assured destruction. X-Files debuted in a time of paranoia in the government and uncovering conspiracies kept from the public eye. On the other end of the spectrum, Arrival released in 2016 during the lead up to the presidential election, obviously influenced by uncertainty and the core theme of combating xenophobia through communication, with it being the factor determining the survival of humanity in the end. The common through line being that we project our anxieties of society onto aliens and how they're depicted. Every notable instance of aliens dominating pop culture is directly correlated to political, historical, or technological shifts of society. Although extraterrestrials can be humanoid or just incomprehensible, the one thing that all of us know is that they are different, and they are the manifestations of what we project onto them. This tradition of layered metaphor is continued in Absolute Martian Manhunter by Deniz and Javier Rodriguez. See, I told you I'd get there eventually. DC's Absolute Universe has taken the comic industry by storm. These books are not only dominating the sales charts, but they're also outperforming their mainline counterparts of these characters. Of course, at the first announcement of the Absolute titles that would be released, they had Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, the three characters that will most likely sell depending on the creative team. And really, if it's Batman, it'll sell anyways. And then we had the second wave of titles: Green Lantern, Flash, and Martian Manhunter. Something that was surprising about the announcement of Absolute Martian Manhunter was, one, the creative team being Deniz and Javier Rodriguez, but also Martian Manhunter is not typically a sales juggernaut of a character that you can guarantee success on. I love the mainline iteration of the character, but realistically, the last time that Martian Manhunter had a solo series was in 2020 with Steve Orlando and Riley Rossmo. Before that, he would rarely lead his own comic series, and really he was just a supporting character for like JLA, and he made an appearance or a reintroduction in Rebirth with DC Metal. Beyond just comics, Martian Manhunter hasn't had the same level of name cachet, with the majority of his popularity stemming from the Justice League animated TV show or the Supergirl CW CBS show. And on top of that, he's the only Absolute character that doesn't have a formal outing for a blockbuster to his name. So the announcement of this series caught me by surprise because it seemed like DC was really taking a gamble on Martian Manhunter, and more specifically allowing the creative team to tell the story they wanted to tell and let them flesh out their story and see if the sales came along with it. Longtime viewers of the channel will know how often I unabashedly praise Deniz Camp's work alongside his murderer's row of collaborators. I routinely cite 20th Century Men alongside Stepan Morian as one of the most important comics of the modern era. Simultaneously, I also praise Assorted Crisis Events with Eric Zawadzki for breaking the confines of what I know the comics medium can be and being the true unification of writer and artist. On the other hand, Javier Rodriguez is not a rookie to the comic medium, getting his start in underground Spanish comics in the late 90s and early 2000s, and then breaking into Marvel with Spider-Man's Brand New Day era. For the vast majority of his career, he would be commonly associated with his work done over at Marvel, so it was very fascinating for me to see that jump over and working at Marvel's distinguished competition. The 12-issue series serves as more than just the standard alternate universe superhero story, and immediately differentiates itself from its contemporaries. For some context, DC's Absolute Universe is built on the foundation that heroes are stripped of their comforts, and the scales are weighted towards the side of evil. If the main universe is destined to side with justice, then the Absolute Universe is destined to side with doom. This alteration of the paradigm is a byproduct of the universe being cultivated by the embodiment of evil, Darkseid. As a quick refresher, Darkseid is a part of the Fourth World Pantheon, and he seeks after the anti-life equation, or the metaphorical representation of the absence of choice. The New Gods are the other end of the spectrum, being freedom fighters fighting against Darkseid and vowing their allegiance to life, or the ability to make choice. With this as a necessary context, the Absolute iteration of Martian Manhunter is a complete reinvention of the pre-existing iteration of the character. This version of the character is made up of John Jones, a despondent FBI agent, unable to communicate with others, and the Martian Mind, the enigmatic entity that is in search of extinguishing anti-life's control. A detail that isn't lost on me is the method that's utilized to convey dialogue from the Martian, or Marty, as I refer to him as. It effectively operates in the same way that foreign languages being translated to English need to be reworded, because the sentence isn't a direct one-to-one. Marty will answer some of the questions from John, or just talking to him, and it feels like multiple choice for the reader to fill in the gaps for what they believe Marty is saying. Take his name, for instance. He dubs himself the Martian Mind, almost as a placeholder for various words to be input, those words being hunt, kill, save, redeem, and heal. These words don't operate as synonyms for one another, but instead describes the motivations of Marty as well as his capabilities. And this detail reveals the underlying themes of the story: empathy and communication. John is introduced in the series as being unable to communicate, which he originally just writes off as being part of the job. As the story moves forward, this becomes the reason that his wife wants a separation and his life starts to deteriorate around him. Another extension of this theme is represented in Tyler, his son, who is autistic nonverbal. John feels inadequate as a father because he doesn't know how to properly communicate with his son. The introduction of Marty to the narrative only exacerbates the struggle that John has with communication, making the conceit of the story being the man that's unable to communicate is now able to read minds. Circling back to the depictions of aliens in cinema, this book shares a direct connection to Arrival, with both of these emphasizing the importance of communication to fight xenophobia. The difference is, Absolute Martian Manhunter is less subdued in that allegory, which is a good thing. Throughout the story, the decay of humanity is attributable to anti-life spreading and infecting people's minds. Anti-life was created in Jack Kirby's Fourth World and specifically represented the rise of fascist rhetoric in the Conservative Party of the 70s. Throughout the saga, he depicted figures like televangelist Billy Graham in comparison to Joseph Goebbels, who was the propagandist and led up to the rise of Hitler in the Nazi Party. Kirby was able to show how this ideology was all-consuming and served as a means of mind control over the populace. The use of anti-life in Absolute Martian Manhunter is following the lead from Kirby to its natural conclusion. While the Fourth World was created to be a warning sign for the rise in fascism, Camp is altering that for the modern day and really serving as a critique for the world around us. In the story, Marty is able to identify the classification of anti-life and giving it the numerical assigned number for bad ideas. The shooter in issue 2 is assigned the bad idea number 2894, or everywhere, everyone, everything enemy. This ideology is common in fascist belief because it places societal issues on a specific demographic of people, making it us versus them. This worldview is exclusionary, and as such only serves the purpose in dehumanizing a specific targeted group. The metaphorical antidote is building community, allowing for common understanding between groups of people. The plot then goes out of its way to describe that the spreading of anti-life is attributable to the White Martian, noted to be the cosmic creator and destroyer. Much like real-world belief, the White Martian's influence is not one that can be vanquished. It can be fought, it can be stripped of its influence, but it can't be extinguished forever. This becomes increasingly important in issue number 5 and 6, with Marty facing off against the White Martian. One page shows as the White Martian is attempting to drop a bomb on a scared population, and Marty is able to defuse the bomb with the idea of military incompetence, thus making the bomb a dud. This proverbial war of ideology is also explored through color theory, which is first introduced into the series in issue 4. Within color theory, you have two spectrums for the perception of color: inclusive and exclusive, or RGB and CMYK. The RGB color model is inclusive, as it provides the opportunity to mix the various colors, creating a glowing white light. Alternatively, the CMYK color model is typically used for printing, and this subtracts the parts of the light spectrum from the perceivable outcome, being black. This is important as the weaponization of color theory is incorporated into the narrative by way of coloring decisions made by Javier Rodriguez, adding another layer of symbolism to give life to this metaphor. Later in the story, the White Martian employs the use of the agency, which is comprised of 3 agents with CMYK color designations. These agents are under the oversight of Uncle Sam, the literal personification of America's underlying corruption, with the the agency stated to be responsible for covering up governmental wrongdoing by diverting attention of the masses to unrelated distractions. You know, that kind of sounds like whenever the Trump administration was in the midst of the Epstein files and they quickly pivoted to declassify documents saying that aliens existed. Oh well, I'm sure it's just a coincidence and it has nothing to do with being widely analyzed to show that there's a correlation between releasing something that's complete distraction and what actually is going on with the leader of the free world. Friend of the channel, Z from Gatecrashers, talks about the utilization of color to convey emotion in their review by stating,
Issue 4's use of color is my favorite use of it in the first arc. From the bright pale yellow of the sun, which I remember this issue also came out during an actual heatwave, which was a funny coincidence, to the gray in John and Bridget's argument, to her in red and him in blue, which further illustrates her anger and his rather passive way of avoiding her. It's that argument that might be my favorite of the entire issue. The smoke around her face, the same kind of smoke that's been used to illustrate people under the trance of the White Martian, finally allows her to express what she's been holding within. The page composition, using the panels with borders to corner the panels using negative space, all to illustrate the feeling of overwhelming emotion. In the immediate next page, Bridget's head explodes into a galaxy of colors as it shrouds John, illustrating every emotion under the sun off of that alone. As the argument evolves, the Martian combines the three primary colors to return the sun to how it was, but by then the three bombers, illustrated in cyan, magenta, and yellow to contrast, set their bombs off, their explosions covering John and Bridget as she gives him an ultimatum.
Anyway, as John is able to thwart the control of the White Martian, it escapes and occupies the mind of Tyler. This retreat is used more as a stratagem to separate John from Marty, leaving both powerless to the White Martian resuming his plan for world annihilation through Antilife. The agency is deployed to capture Marty, which they're able to do by weaponizing the reader against him, prompting us to bind Marty within a drawn pentagon shape. It's the uses of the medium such as this and the Martian vision that solidify the importance of this book in my mind. It not only is the amalgamation of each of the creative team operating at full capacity, but also is expanding beyond the page to use the medium to its max potential. While of course it's not the first of its kind to explore the confines of the medium, it is a testament to doing so while retaining an audience of predominantly Big 2 only readers, who may have never thought of said constraints until these moments. Moving back to the book, it's the introduction of this iteration of the Absolute Universe's Despero that really caught my eye whenever I was first reading it. While he's loosely connected to Martian Manhunter in the mainline universe, this version of Despero, Despair the Zero, is more akin to the aforementioned color theory models, inverting the motivations of Marty and used as the personification of John's worst habits. Despair the Zero emphasizes the central thesis of the narrative, being about empathy and communication, while he and Antilife is altering reality to suit the needs of the White Martian. The further consumed John is by the destruction of his relationship to his son and his wife, the more powerful Despair the Zero becomes. This absolute Despero's transposing with Marty best embodies Antilife's impact within John. It's only whenever John is faced with certain death that he comes to the realization of how the binary between darkness and the light had been the secret to setting things right. This allows for John to break Marty out of the grasp of the agency. While the story was able to firmly establish the importance of choice early on, its significance is magnified in the penultimate issue, and it goes on to elaborate that humanity is the byproduct of the collective choices made within one lifetime. It's the choice of the individual to see the best in someone, and also it's the choice of the individual to embrace empathy and communicate with your fellow man. Despair the Zero attempts to fracture John's psyche with a presumption that humanity is inherently evil, and as a result, they're predetermined to align with Antilife. This of course is dispelled in the final moments of issue 11 and moving into issue 12, as we witness Bridget breaking free of the influence of Tyler and immediately seeking out John. Once they're brought together, it leads them to have the ability to unite in the mind by way of Marty, finally being able to break down the communication barrier between the two and embracing their shared humanity. One point that I wanted to highlight in this video is the resolution of the story and how it doesn't shy away from Tyler's nonverbal autism. I feel like lesser creative teams wouldn't have handled this topic with the same level of care. Once we reach the end of the story, it's not like Tyler is cured of being nonverbal, and instead his father has to adapt to his method of speaking. This allows for Tyler to not only feel seen, but also comforted by his father, utilizing his way of communication and being able to connect with him on a human-to-human basis. I appreciate this because it emphasizes the importance of empathy and communication, while also not trying to just brush away something that would be ableist to just say, oh, he could talk again, he could communicate now. That just doesn't happen, and I'm glad that the creative team took their time and the care in presenting this story and making sure that nonverbal autistic people are properly represented in this narrative. If I can be honest, I'm going to miss Absolute Martian Manhunter. If for nothing else, the creative team being able to formulate a story such as this in a line of comics that are already successful, and them being able to craft this narrative that is not only a reflection of the modern day, but also explores the comics medium in a way that I feel is fresh. There's so much in this story that I think is ripe for dissection and looking into it further, but I just wanted to formulate all of my thoughts into a script and talk about this series and why I loved it so much, and how the hype for Absolute Martian Manhunter was just like ideology. It was all-consuming, but in a way that is anti-life. So life. I think something that needs to be reflected upon is how this book utilizes the fourth world to do a critique of politics of the modern day, but not just politics, the radicalization of communication through things like the internet, being able to just bolster the most toxic voices. That is anti-life. The ideas of being exclusionary, that is anti-life. And how can we combat anti-life? Communication and empathy. Anyways, I'm sure this video is absolutely too long, and I just wanted to talk about my love for this series and how much I'm going to miss it, but also getting in on the ground floor of a series that will inevitably be a classic in Big 2 comics, but also comics in general. And again, I want to thank Korinzik and Cam and everybody else that supports me over on Patreon and helps me keep the lights on. And if you too want to help support the channel and get videos early, you can subscribe for as low as $1 per month. Oh, and one last thing. Read Absolute Martian Manhunter, or else.